My goal here today, I'll give a quick introduction. My name is Kyle. I'm the CEO here. We've been doing this since we started the company back in 2012. I think what makes us rad these types of conversations is that this is the life that we lived. So we named the company a reviewer because that's who we were. We were, volunteers reviewing funding applications, going through judging, going through scoring, going through deliberation. That was way back in time, and most of these campaigns are done through paper. So some of you guys, if you want to, react with an emoji, still very much maybe, doing fillable binders and PDFs. We then kind of live that online transition when organizations try to go on live. So, fillable web forms, lots and lots of spreadsheets, emails, downloading documents. And so from us, it became very challenging understanding that from an operational perspective, a whole lot of time and energy that you guys, quite frankly, don't have. We're going into very manual tasks, but from a review committee perspective, we're volunteers. We've got children. We're typically doing this at like 10:30 at night on our tablets on a Wednesday. We didn't have the bandwidth to be downloading documents, going to Excel spreadsheets, filling out our notes and sending it back. And then two very problematic things started happening. So again, this is primarily targeting scholarship providers here today, is that we saw firsthand entire funding cycles closed, checks were cut, and then 6 months later, very deserving scholarship applicants back out asking for status updates. And we're left kind of, twiddling our thumbs saying, well, we never even looked at your application. What are you talking about? And it turned out that they were sitting within spam filters, or because of all the downloading and exporting, it got misplaced. So it's very unfair. It's very sad. It's unfortunate. It's also a compliance risk. We'll kind of get into some of these topics. We also started to have very sensitive information being shared with us. So who the applicants were, demographic details, and that led to very clear biases in the judging, review, and selection processes. So those are the experiences that led us to build Reviewer. We're very fortunate to be in a position where we've got thousands of scholarships who are using Reviewer to power their programs. Each one of them are very unique. Now, that said, most scholarship providers are kind of faced with the same kind of common core challenges. And so we're able to kind of sit at the front lines here and hear direct feedback from our clients, like what are the common challenges that they're running into? How do you want them solved? What are some of the trends that you guys are kind of facing within the space? And that really helps us dictate both features, but also like what type of resources and collateral that we can share. So with that kind of thought process, the goal today is I want to kind of cover kind of two main things. One is we kind of did a deep audit and deep dive of some of our clients who I think are doing things really, really well, who are kind of doing not only emerging trends, but also kind of trying to tackle these challenges in unique ways. And then also, how do we leverage technology as a platform that not just helps save you guys a substantial number of time, but probably equally, if not more important, is how to elevate the experience for the stakeholders and the donors, for the applicants, the volunteers, the board members, you name it. So I use that term quite a bit, experience. We're going to cover three of them: the applicant experience, operational experiences, and then for me, one of the core topics is like the review, selection, scoring experience, because that's kind of what makes everything realistic. And again, we might kind of bounce over here just a little bit to some different topics. As you can see, if I open up any of these kind of discussion points, there's a fair amount of content. We go through all this. I'll use it as like a discussion point to kind of give an introduction of the theory or of the theme. And then, like I mentioned, we'll share this back out. So each one of these will have like actionable next steps that you guys can do to start. So with all that said, I am going to go kind of out of order here. The first thing I want to kind of start with, though, obviously, is a dedicated scholarship management system. I'm not trying to plug Reviewer here right away. With that said, managing a scholarship program, or for some of you, I recognize some names, you might be offering different types of grants or fellowships. The concept is all interchangeable. There are so many moving parts and pieces. You've got people, you've got application forms, you've got file uploads, you've got like your workflows and the judging and scoring processes, you've got, potentially impact reporting. And so truthfully, the only way that you can systematize these programs is having like a dedicated command center built for the task at hand. Most scholarship providers, at least prior to working with us or other tools, are leveraging like 8 to 10 different systems. You've got your built-in web forms, you've got your spreadsheets, you've got your Google Drives. And so again, the only way that you can systematize this is to kind of eliminate those into one centralized, what I call a command center or platform that really does manage the entire scholarship lifecycle from start to finish. And some of these other kind of topics that we're going to get into, such as like how do you normalize judge biases or how do you pair up selection committees with applicants, can only be achieved with that type of concept. So not to get into reviewer, but if you guys can kind of visualize what managing a scholarship may look like, this is kind of the route that I want us to kind of have our mindset shift for, where you have like dedicated kind of dashboards and command centers that allows you to track progress, communicate with people, view your entries, build out your workflows, literally from start to finish. The entire life cycle is managed in one centralized place. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. Include by all means you can. I don't want to under also data security and privacy. With programs of this caliber, like 99% of the time, we're dealing with confidential proprietary information about students or applicants or financials. And so I want to make sure that whatever tools that you're using are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. Anytime you start to export and download and leave that confinement, you start to lose a lot of that data security and privacy. So for some of you might be in like highly regulated industries, I'll leave it at that, but I want to make sure we kind of just touch on that. So with all that said, let's kind of start from the very beginning. For the apps is very important. So I see, kind of two things happening on a daily basis. Many of you guys offer potentially multiple different scholarships, or the funding opportunities that you have very clear criteria and eligibility. And what happens is generally from an applicant perspective, they go and they apply for literally everything available. They don't put any thought, or they don't even look at what those criteria are or what the requirements are. So what's going to end up happening is two things. One is they're going to spend just a substantial amount of time, applying for funding that they just quite frankly can't achieve. So from their perspective, it's a really poor experience that theoretically they put on themselves, but there's things that we can do. Number two is that you're also spending a whole bunch of time going through every single applicant and trying to match them up to ensure that they actually meet those requirements. They have all the deliverables submitted. They meet your eligibility criteria. So you're spending a whole bunch of time that is potentially unnecessary. The other component here is matching. So for some of you, and you guys can again react with emojis or type in the chat, how many of you offer multiple different types of scholarships where each one of them potentially has different type of eligibility criteria or requirements? We work with a school foundation that offers 100 different scholarships, and their big core challenge is that many times applicants don't even know what opportunities are available to them. So if they're donor-sponsored funds, they're going underfunded, they're going underapplied, and there's very, very deserving applicants out there whose lives could be changed if they would have known that it existed and that they could have applied to it. So the thought here is how do we build in like smart eligibility matching and checking into your applicant process where we in real time can ensure that only those that are actually eligible and meet the requirements can proceed on, saving them time and you time, but also helping bring awareness to some of these different types of programs that they may not have known existed. The kind of second piece to that, and we'll kind of look at this, is how do you then start to collect very hyper-personalized information from them based off of those different types of scholarships, right? So if I'm applying to scholarship number A, I might have completely different deliverables, different file uploads, different forms, different dates and deadlines. Maybe you want me as a review committee member to be looking at a certain scholarship or somebody else is looking at another. So not only do we want to talk through how do we automate the matching requirement type of side of things, but also on the back end, how do we kind of start to create automations that start to do those pairings for you guys? So long-winded again, some best practices and takeaways. What you can do is kind of think through do a quick little audit of some of the different criteria that you have. Also look at like from a legal compliance perspective, any unnecessary barriers. I would pilot this. So I basically come up with like what's a short 10 to 15 question survey that applicants can fill out and figure out like, can you cover all of your requirements with those 10 to 15 questions or you need more of it? Or are there opportunities or requirements that got missed? And then how do we start to implement it? So to visualize this for you, this is a very, very, very common experience within Reviewer. So again, going back to creating systems and having dedicated tools, I think it's essential to look at a scholarship from a concept of people and profiles. I think so often we get bogged down in data. We've got forms, we've got file uploads, we got this and we got that. These are people and we have to treat them as such. So at least within our system, we ask applicants to create a profile, and that kind of at least initially brings them into the application experience. But long term, that profile holds on to who they are, holds on to their file uploads, it holds on to communication, it holds on to results. And in this example, if I, as Michael, am an applicant who gets selected for a scholarship, it also creates the opportunity for me to come back and do scholarship acceptance letters, fund disbursement forms, and some of those things. But it kind of centralizes it into one spot for you. So a very common scholarship structure in Reviewer is to first and foremost, let's figure out like who this person is, and let's build in kind of that matching tool. So we'll kind of get into like some AI enrichment here as well towards the end of the conversation. But the goal here is like, how do we build a persona for the applicant? So this matching tool is meant to align with every one of your scholarships and or each of their unique eligibility and requirements. And what ends up happening here is the applicant can answer a series of questions. And in real time, behind the scenes, the system is doing these kind of complex lookups to figure out, okay, who is this person? What are their answers? And then based off of those answers, are they meeting requirements, yes or no? And if yes, which programs are they actually meeting? So the idea is to lower the barrier for applicant success. We don't want them to put any thought or time and energy into like reading those requirements and kind of going through the process. We want systems to interact with them, not vice versa. So as soon as they're filling out their persona, and this is a very, very basic rudimentary example, the system will then say, great, now that we know who you are and some information about you, these are the 3 scholarships that we have available that you are not only eligible for, but also that you match up or align with. So going back to like that story that I told you earlier on, like what if there's a scholarship only available to people who are going to a technical college trying to pursue a career in a very specific career path? The system would then know that and say, great, you actually are a great candidate for the Brooke Marlowe scholarship. Once they then make their selection at that point, it then drops them directly into the application form. This then becomes completely customizable. So in this example, like the Brooke Marlowe scholarship, because it could be a donor fund by the Brooke Marlowe family, can have their own unique application forms. They can have their own file uploads, their own deliverables, their own dates and deadlines. All that happens automatically on the fly. It never requires you guys to get involved whatsoever. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but then on the back end, we're actually creating what I call a bucket. So in real time, we've got a Brooke Marlowe bucket that is getting filled up with all of the Brooke Marlowe applicants based off of them clicking in it and applying towards it. So a question came in, is this survey attached to the application itself, or is it a separate program? So great question. It's going to be unique to you. So what ends up happening is when you start to use Reviewer, we basically will kind of create like this list of programs and scholarships and eligibility requirements, and we start to do the matching in real time. So it's unique to you guys, but it lives on the kind of submission itself. So each of your programs can have completely unique and different requirements and eligibility and matching tools that are integrated with it. So I know I'm kind of going quick. Again, I'm trying to consolidate a whole lot of really hard-hitting things in about 30 minutes or so. But if anybody else has any questions or comments on this, please do let me know. But again, the main takeaway here is elevating applicant experience, helping bring awareness to opportunities that they may not be aware of going into it. And then on your team's end, very systematically reducing time spent checking eligibility, checking verifications, things like that. You can go one step further. So again, obviously every program has then data requirements. So certain types of file uploads, we want to make sure that you guys have the ability to make them required or not required, etc. I'm going to go ahead and follow up with that. So if I go back to kind of our presentation, I'm going to jump to communication as well as references, kind of in one full swoop. So in Reviewer, actually managing and monitoring progress in real time. So what's going to end up happening here is you can in real time look at like, okay, how many people have started these profiles and begun their applications? Who are they? How far have they made it? And then at that point, you can start to automate or create email templates to send things like reminder messages. So for those of you trying to increase volume, this in itself typically boosts volume rates by about 30%. So what's going to happen is it'll say, hey, Billy has started an application, they're in progress, they're not done. So maybe every 6 days, send them a reminder message. I'm not going to talk too much about communication today, but the idea is to kind of create communication and touch point structures throughout the entire course of the campaign. So being very transparent of dates and deadlines, progress percentages, reminder messages, confirmation emails, as they progress from one stage to the next, confirmation emails once it's all been said and done. The idea is that there's so many touch points to help build a higher engagement with your participants and your users, that potentially, we want to take that thought process off of you guys, just kind of preload them, set them, forget them, and let the communication happen on its own, and then watch the results come in. One of those touch points, however, is your references. So I am kind of curious. It's going to be hard, so I'm going to type it in here quick. Collect. So if you want to react to that question of how many of you are collecting references on behalf of applicants, I'm just kind of curious of, like, out of the participants, how many do this. So I'm a little bit passionate about this. So on the reference side of things, I try to build my scholarships as a way to, as personal storytelling. There's only so much information you can gather from grades or transcripts or financial need. So for me, personal storytelling falls into two distinct buckets, one of which would be like essays. How do you give your applicants a voice and differentiate themselves versus one another? Not covered today, but kind of a bonus plot twist here is maybe consider doing video essays. Get into AI. So there's ways that we can leverage AI to detect the utilization of AI, such as ChatGPT, which is becoming very common for applicants to leverage when they write essays. One way to also combat that is to have applicants do like a video essay. It's also a really great way for them to kind of, let their personality shine. The other component to that, though, is getting external references about them. Now, my challenge with references is what happens is that humans in general will always procrastinate. They wait to the very, very last minute. So what happens is that when an applicant applies to your scholarship, the person that's doing the reference is also being asked also at the last minute as well. So that's one part of it. Part number two is reference letters in general are a better reflection of, like, the writing ability of the reference and not necessarily who it's for. And so what ends up happening is you've got really strong candidates whose references either didn't do it or they put forth very little effort, which may negatively impact them. You also have references kind of talking about different topics, which could be a bonus because it offers unique insights. But if our goal is to kind of be very compliant and fair and transparent, ideally we have consistent data. And so we can combat this by doing what I call reference templates. So here's kind of how that's leveraged within Reviewer. Or if you're not using Reviewer, you can still obviously implement these concepts. The idea, however, is to collect the references directly from the source. Now, without using tools, what's going to happen is you're going to have references sending you random emails, and they're going to say, hey, here's my reference. You're not going to know who they are, who it's for, and then you have to figure out how you're going to connect it to their application. In Reviewer, the idea is that you actually ask the applicant to put in who the reference is. Ideally, you do that very early on in the experience. So, like, as soon as they create their profile, they put in their references, and then notifications go out. So the idea is that this allows the applicant to kind of continue on filling out their application form, while at the same time, the references are now doing their work for one another, kind of getting bogged down. The next piece of that would be the notification. So once the references get notified that they've been asked to create a reference, they then simply click on a link, which brings them directly into a reference portal. So much like applicants and your review team, the entire goal is to lower their barrier for success. So you can absolutely still have them upload a reference letter, but some of the trend that we've seen is that they're asking references to actually rank the applicant on a series of qualities that you may be looking for in a candidate, or what are 2 or 3 very short form kind of like essays or prompts you want the references to answer. So for them, they just simply click on a link, answer the questions, and then boom, they're done. Now, why this works really well is 2 things. Number one is from an admin perspective, you can monitor their progress. So you in real time can see what outstanding individuals have been asked to submit a reference. Are they done or not done? And if they're not done, you can send reminders. You can help bring visibility to applicants. So applicants themselves can monitor, are my references doing it or not? You can also hide their information. So maybe you don't want references to applicants to see what references are saying about them. They just want to know, are they done or not done, so they can do their own reminders and have self-ownership as well. From an operation perspective, Reviewer has a concept called, again, profiles. So when you're viewing content, you can actually find all of your applicants and you can sort and filter by your different scholarships or phases or statuses. And once you open up their profiles, you can kind of visualize in the center of my page, Michael got, here's all the information that we collected from he or she. We've got some built-in communication tools. I'm going to come back to file uploads, but basically every file that gets uploaded lives on their account. you can press view and it actually embeds their files on there. So that means that your staff and the review team never has to like download and export. It kind of keeps them all in one hub. But jumping way ahead from a reference perspective, what's basically going to happen here is every reference shows up on their profile. So I can see that I have Steve and Paula. When I click view, so again, if I'm part of your review committee, I can actually side by side view applications, view files, and view references while filling out my score sheets. At the same time, as we're talking about that, you can start to redact information. So we'll kind of come back to data redaction, but when it's not living in a letter, and it's living in a portal, it makes data redaction significantly easier. So a question came out like, what prevents applicants from completing the reference instead of the actual reference themselves? So it's a little bit challenging, right? Because we can't prevent them from, say, for example, like creating a fake reference, but that would be the same challenge, generally speaking, you'd have if they submitted it either themselves as an upload or if they had it mailed into you or sent via email. So since we are triggering those reminder messages, we know exactly who the reference is because we're requesting an email address. So the only way that they could do that would be to hypothetically create a fake person in Gmail, create their own email address and have it sent to themselves and fill it out. So the way that this works is that, number one, that would still be an issue, right? If they were sending it to you either physically in the forums or emailing it to you. But number two is we do track IPs if it's a concern. And so we can kind of say, hey, did that message or reference originate from the same place as the submission itself? So you can't 100% combat that, but it does give you some extra tools to combat it that you previously probably didn't have the ability to do. So a couple other kind of quick questions came in. Pricing we can kind of get into. You're looking to find more scholarship opportunities for your institution. So Reviewer itself doesn't do carryover amongst clients. So we don't have like a database of scholarships available for you guys to help kind of find applicants. We're kind of a dedicated platform for you guys to kind of power your own programs and infrastructure. With that, any other questions or comments you want to add to that reference? Again, it's a bit polarizing because you can still do your direct reference upload letters, but this whole new model of doing reference templates is, I think, quite unique, and it's something that we're starting to see happening at the upper university level that's now permeating into most scholarships in itself. So kind of moving on, I want to talk a little bit about some of the review things, and then we'll kind of come back to both impact reporting and then kind of what the future of AI looks like for scholarship providers. So I want to start with review pairing. So there's so many ways that your teams can pair up your staff or your committees with submissions for review. And this kind of goes back to what I was looking at on the matching tool, where applicants answer a series of questions and then they kind of pick the scholarship. So I mentioned that behind the scenes, we're actually creating buckets. So I think there's many ways to structure this. At least within Reviewer, I call it buckets. Many of our clients will actually create one bucket per scholarship, and then from there, they can have layers to it. So maybe you only offer one scholarship, or maybe your scholarships are multiple phases. So phase one is a quick vetting, phase two is a scorecard, phase three is an interview, phase four is final selection. There's many ways to set this up. What I want to talk about, though, is how you systematically pair up your staff and your teams with applicants. So some of the data that we have suggests that on average, most volunteers cannot evaluate more than 25 people. It seems like a small number, but their energy falls off pretty dramatically. And there's very clear data that suggests that people who are scored, 1, 2, and 3 have different results than those that are scored, 27, 28, and 29. So if we know that, that means that we have to find out how we pair up our submissions with our reviewers without overwhelming them, but also how do you pair them up if you have committees or different programs. So the idea here is to ideally leverage some type of opportunity or systems that in real time your applicants and then pair them up with your staff for you guys. So many of our clients will create buckets, and then what happens is the system gets fills up a bucket for you automatically. So if this was called like the Brooke Marlowe Scholarship, every applicant that applies gets dropped into that bucket. What you can then do is pair up your bucket with a team. So whenever Simon, Paula, and Mark log into Reviewer or whatever systems that you're going to use, they're only seeing the submissions within their bucket. So this, for those of you that have like committees, that's perfect. You basically create one committee per bucket. If your team is reviewing multiple scholarships, that's also great. You just drop them into multiple buckets. So we're kind of categorizing your entrants for you. What I wanted to show you though, what that emerging trend is automating some of this based off of randomization. So it goes back to like fair, non-biased reviews. What we can do here is we can say, well, here's a list of all my scholarship applicants within a bucket, and maybe you want each one to get reviewed 5 times, no more, no less. Or maybe you want your team to never look at more than 25 people because that's the cutoff, but they have to look at least 10. What you can do is you can bulk select your applicants and then type in those numbers. So in this example, maybe I want every evaluator to look at 3 people. You type that in, and then the system will then equally and randomly take your submissions and then automatically pair them up with your review team based off of those numbers. So when that's done, the system will actually show you, hey, here's all of our reviewers, here's how many submissions were assigned to each one of them, and then by the way, here's who those submissions are. So if you ever want to override this and say, well, there's a conflict of interest or somebody drops out, you can just click edit, and then you can start to manually check or uncheck names and go really deep into the weeds and pair people up. So the emerging trend here that I want to talk about was that automation, where we're basically saying, what is our review team's workload capacity? How many submissions do we have? If we have more submissions that exceed their capacity, then let's just kind of auto assign that back at them. The other layer to this too, and this is another kind of core concept, is what I call judge queuing. So this in theory sounds great, but humans procrastinate. So what happens if your judging deadline is tomorrow and half of your evaluators haven't done anything? The applicants still need to be scored. But what many of our clients have decided to do is they actually will take every single applicant and they pair it up with every single evaluator. What that means is that your review team can score as many submissions as they want. So if you've got a judge who wants to score 30 or 40 because they can do that, they certainly can. But if one of your judges can only score 1 and then they drop out, then that's fine. Because what happens is you set a threshold. So you basically say, I want every applicant to be scored 5 times or whatever that number looks like. Once that submission hits 5, it then falls off that list. So when your review team comes in to score, if it's available for them to evaluate, it means it still needs 5 scores. They can kind of score it and they can move on. But again, it kind of ensures that people are working at their own pace on their own time, and every applicant gets the fair number of submissions scored. For those of you who are going to attempt to do that without reviewer, what you need to do is make sure that list is randomized, because what's going to happen is when the review team comes in, they're always going to work down the top of the list, right? So if you give it to them alphabetically or by numbers, everybody who comes in to score is always going to review the first person and then the second person. So when they come in to score, what you really want is that list to be completely random. That way the reviews are coming in equally and spread across your volume. While we're talking about this, let's look at both the online review and then also a concept called score normalization. So for me, one of the biggest hurdles organizations have is, once they collect the applications, they pair them with the review team, and then it's time to begin scoring them. And 2 things happen. Number 1 is that you have to find a way to give your staff or your reviewers the submissions to score. 2 is that you have some type of structured approach. You want each one of them to be kind of evaluating each applicant based off of a set criteria for consistency, as well as kind of aligning expectations. So to combat that in reviewer, once the pairings are done, you can then equally and randomly assign them. The review team comes into the system and they view a list of who they've been assigned to review. One of the other elements here is also PII. So one thing I do want to note that if there's any opportunity where there's content in the applicant's form or their profile that may alter the perception of the reviewer, let's just go ahead and hide it. There's no need to show them, personal identifying information or demographic details for most of you, because it can only lead to potentially problems. So the idea is to use tools like Reviewer to automatically redact that information. Number 2 is if you're collecting a bunch of information that's just not relevant to the judging, it's only for record keeping purposes, also hide that because it'll avoid them getting overwhelmed. But the idea here is that the review team can simply open the applicant profile up and then it shows them the content that was shared. So this is the exact example we looked at. However, you don't know that this is Michael anymore because all the data has been redacted. And then off to the right is your scorecard. So the idea here is that your team has a systematic kind of process in place. They just answer the scorecard questions. They can kind of side by side review the content, answer the scorecard. They can look at the file uploads. They can jump over the references. And then once they're done scoring, they just submit and then they move on to the next. One thing that I noted in kind of the presentation that I'll share that I'll just kind of briefly touch on is best practices with judging. People get bogged down in numbers. Now, this is a poor example because it basically says, rank this applicant on a scale from 0 to 20. If I'm one of your evaluators, I'm going to say, well, what's a difference between a 17 versus an 18? It slows me down. So instead, maybe offer like an emotional response. So from like good, great, and ugly, rank this applicants as exemplary to below average, rate their leadership. And then behind the scenes, those emotional responses can still have mathematic-based numbers correlated with it. So we can still build out scorecards and leaderboards, but the review team is just answering emotionally. It's higher quality review and it speeds up their time. From here, what's going to happen is then you guys will get kind of these leaderboards that show you in real time every applicant, the team that reviewed them, how they scored individually and how they scored collectively. So you can leverage this information to deliberate or announce your recipients. Or if it's a multi-phase program, you can have like a cutoff line and say, well, I want to take my top 3 and now I want to interview them. You can select them from here and then advance them to the interview. So with all that said, I want to touch on kind of a couple more really quick topics. I know I'm kind of eating up time here. There's a lot to cover. So we'll probably, again, we'll this out after. I introduced a pretty severe challenge. So I talked about how I love randomization, which basically means, every submission is randomly assigned to a team for scoring. When you do that, however, that means that not every evaluator is looking at the same submissions. So if I go back to my presentation, this is covered under score normalization. And you can kind of see it happening here in real time. Mark scored Sheldon a 12, but then Judy scored a 31. That's a major difference between the two scores. So my first question would be, okay, did Mark just score Sheldon low for a very specific reason? Or what if historically Mark is a tough judge? He never gives higher than a 13, 14. So by his own standards, he scored Sheldon extremely well, but in comparison to the other judges, Sheldon is now being penalized and in fact is preventing Sheldon from being the highest rated applicant. So we can combat that through what I call normalization. Not going to get too deep into the spreadsheet, but what's happening here, this is a real client of ours, all the data has been redacted, but they had the same challenge. And you can see that here, Judge Judy on average scores about a 24, but Tony scores about a 34. So those two judges have a very strong 10-point difference between their scores. So I, as an applicant, if I was scored by Judge Judy, I inherently am being penalized. With that said, we recruited Judge Judy for a reason. We value her expertise. So we don't want to kind of penalize her for scoring the way that she did. So what happens here is now that we know each individual judge's personal tendencies, we can analyze it. So if you got scored a 23.875 by Judge Judy, we don't care. What you were really scored was 1. You were scored completely averaged. If you scored higher than a 23, such as a 27, you scored like a 1.15, which means you scored like 1.15 times higher than her average. If you scored a 16, you actually scored below 1 because you were scored below her personal average. And then what we do is we take those individual judging averages and we compare to one another. So again, not to get too deep in the weeds, but the end results look a little goofy. You can kind of see here that Bruce is our highest rated applicant who collectively scored 1.15 times higher than the collective average, whereas Elon here scored a 0.83, almost 20% lower than the collective average. So we're still valuing the individual judging tendencies. We're just not penalizing applicants for being paired up with either a strict or easy judge. This is going to be absolutely critical for anybody who decides to randomly assign submissions to judges, because we know for a fact not everybody is reviewing everybody. So if you have any questions on that, please do toss it in there. So 2 last things I want to touch on. One is impact reporting. So another kind of quick question. I know we're kind of bumping up on time, so I really appreciate those that are still hanging out. How many people collect fund disbursement or ongoing data from scholars? So for me, as an evaluator, one of my questions is always how that our program is changing people's lives. How do we measure ROI? How do we measure the impact that our scholarship program is having, right? And it's a very simple question because all we need to do is collect answers from applicants. In practice, it's very, very challenging because once they go through the scholarship process, they're done, they're gone. They need to have a way to systematically send you guys those results or those impact reports. And the only way that you can do that is to A, lower the barrier, and then B, be able to report back on it. So jumping back to my example, we'll keep this very, very simple. Let's go back to Michael. Hypothetically, let's say Michael is selected for a scholarship. What happens is at some type of frequency, it could be as soon as they're awarded or maybe like 1 year later, you can trigger a notification reviewer saying, hey, Michael, it's time for your fund disbursement form, or hey, Michael, it's time for your 1-year impact report. He or she just simply clicks on a link, they click add new, and then you have a predefined list of what those deliverables that you need from them. And those deliverables have to be systematized so every applicant kind of has the same structure. What happens is Michael simply clicks on it and they answer the questions directly within Reviewer. So again, this could be a fund disbursement form. So like, how much are you receiving, where the check's going to be cut, verify your information, plus e-sign, the agreement that you're going to get a scholarship. If this was an impact report, it might be like, did you graduate with the same, what was your student loans when you graduated? What was your GPA? Did you get a job in your desired career field? This conversation could be its own webinar, but then when they submit this, it gets attached back to their initial profile. So what started with Michael filling out a form has now grown to form, file uploads, communication, results, references, and ongoing surveys or forms being submitted. So now when you guys go to generate reports, you can actually say, hey, show me all my scholarships, average the amount of student loan debt that they graduated with, tell me what percent were in a certain demographic, tell me what percent got a job in their desired career field. Things like that become realistic once you have a way to systematize it. So I know there's questions coming in. I'm going to answer them here in just 1 second. The last thing I want to touch on, I'm just going to leave this here as I talk, is what does the future of AI look like in scholarship management? And it's a fun conversation because this answer will change tomorrow and it's going to change again the next day. The space is evolving so much. So at Reviewer, we're kind of doubling down. We want to be at the forefront of how we can leverage AI as a way to not only streamline your time, but also make programs fair, non-biased, elevate the experience. We're working with our current clients to help identify like where using AI actually makes sense and provides value. We're also creating kind of like a values group to make sure that we're doing it in a very ethical way. So the challenge is that AI is a broad topic. We actually discussed a lot of elements today where we're already doing this. A lot of products and software out there will say it's AI when it's really not, it's just advanced algorithms. So things like eligibility screening, matching applicants, doing plagiarism detection, checking on if they used AI or not. Those are all things that are happening right now, non-AI related. Where this becomes more interesting, and this is where I'm open to feedback or things that potentially you guys are testing now, is how do we help you guys do like sentiment analysis, right? So if you have a large program, how do you take their large applications, summarize the data in very bite-sized format, and then start to compare it to other applicants that help you guys kind of get like this leaderboard that you still should be reviewing, but it kind of helps you prioritize and pre-rank people. The biggest challenge that organizations have that want to go to full AI reviewing, and right now I'm very anti that, is you've got decades and decades of flawed processes that the review process, if you use AI, is going to be leveraging hidden biases from a decade of poor processes. So it's this very clear balancing act of like, where does it make sense? So initially speaking, whatever we can do to streamline all of your eligibility screening, completion, sentiment analysis, summarizing of applicant information, potentially automating some of the scoring. So for example, like in your application form, are you collecting volunteer hours? Are you collecting GPA? There's ways that we can automatically score them based off of those answers and not have your review team subjectively doing that or potentially having human error. On top of that, like how do you start to do things like automated notifications, accessibility, having reports being generated for you guys based off of the things that you might be looking for. This list goes on and on, but I think I want to just kind of touch on this, that there's a lot of topics that we can kind of talk through. I'll share this back out, but for those that are exploring using AI, I'm very interested in like how you feel like it's going to provide value, because that's going to help us decide like what to build in. But without a doubt, there's like probably 6 to 7 things here that are no brainers. So yeah, I know I ran for time. I want to make sure I get to everybody's questions. So with all that said, please do fill up the chat with as many questions as you want. This entire thing will be sent out after. So again, even things like your normalization scores, each one of these has clear, actionable next steps and insights that you guys can start to audit your internal programs to make decisions on, do you want to implement this, yes or no? And if so, how do you actually do so in a very low barrier way? Okay, so questions. Is the score normalization feature in Reviewer or just a spreadsheet? So two things. Yes, it's in Reviewer right now. It's a feature that we currently have. It's often used as a downloadable export just because there's so much data in there. Because for this to work, what you really want to do is be able to measure on a per judge basis, not just their personal tendencies, but also like on a per scorecard question basis. How are they scoring? We also have it built into system interfaces. That way, if you want to kind of pull it up on demand and look at it, you can. A lot of people prefer to sit down to a spreadsheet, but it's up to you. But yes, that is a thing right now anybody can utilize. Do we integrate with Salesforce? So Reviewer does have a large number of integrations. It's a high-level term. Integration could be like single sign-on. It could be passing data to Reviewer. It could be passing data back. So we want to explore more of how you want systems and tools to integrate. Generally speaking, for those of you guys that have databases or AMSs, they should serve as the system of truth. However, obviously, they don't have these tools in place to run a scholarship from start to finish. So leverage platforms like Reviewer to logistically power the program and feed the data back as like your centralized hub for storage. Do you typically provide training standardization to your reviewers to normalize expectations, or do you rely solely on normalization? I think it's very, very important to work with your review committees to set expectations of how or what lens you want them to look at applications. And for those of you that have multiple years of data, you guys can very easily provide them examples of like prior scholars who excelled and that were selected and how they were reviewed to set that barometer or benchmark. I also feel that your review team should be involved in how you guys structure your scorecards. They offer valuable and unique insights that might influence how you want to score people. With that said, the more hands that are involved, the more complex it gets. You cannot have overly complex judging and scoring. It has a high barrier. So yes, I want to make sure that every judge is level set. I want to make sure that we have a very clear, simple rubric that they all follow and utilize. But then from there, I want them to use their own kind of like knowledge and their own thought process of how they score, and then use the normalization to either identify like, is this even a problem or not? And if it is, then how do you start to combat it? How do you broach the AI issue? Yeah, how do we approach the AI issue with scholarship sponsors who are reluctant and resistant to tech? Tremendous question. That's why I don't love the term AI, even though I used it. A lot of this here is basically using technology and systems to do advanced reasoning for you guys. It's not really artificial intelligence. Where artificial intelligence comes into play is when you have it making decisions for you. That's kind of on our end right now. I'm not pro having AI score people because, again, the data language models that they have are flawed. Again, we built Reviewer because we saw decades of bias in selections. That's going to happen in AI as well. We're working again with from an ethical perspective with our clients to figure out like how do we want to do this. Now, for some of you, you have decades of data, and you can look at like what are the characteristics of scholars, and or what are you looking at, and then you can also look at results of like how they were reviewed. And in your own kind of confined environment, you can absolutely leverage that to auto rank applicants based off of your own data, but to be very positive that that data is not flawed and that those results were actually valid and that you actually agree with it. So yeah, there's a lot of reluctancy. What I would tell you is that the space is evolving tremendously, and that don't jump in 2 feet right away. Let's kind of inch into it. I think AI is going to permeate how we use tools, and the adoption rates are going to go up. I mean, they have gone up over the last year. It's only going to continue to do so. Question, are you able to control what is masked for each program you have? So I think when you say the word mask, you're talking about data redaction. The answer is yes. And so whatever data you collect within a platform like Reviewer, you're going to have the ability to say, should it be redacted? And then if so, from whose point of view, right? Because there's lots of different people involved in these programs. That's not happening on a per submission basis. It's program specific. In fact, it might even be multiple phases. So for example, if I have a scholarship program where I'm doing a phase 1 review, I might want a bunch of information, but then maybe I want my final committee or board to see some of the information that was prior redacted, or maybe you want me as like your accountant or your controller to come in to like access confidential information for distributing funds, right? People should have access to different data at different times. You have to have that flexibility. How we can talk about how we deal with transcripts. You're moving mostly to unofficial so students can upload and not have to pay for them. I'm wondering how you integrate both unofficial. Yes, very, very good question. So we live in a time now where unofficial transcripts are being more common, which creates a lot of opportunity for you. So a couple things come into play. Number one is like you can absolutely have your applicants upload transcripts directly into Reviewer. With that said, if you have a progressive program, you could also leverage the reference feature, right? So I named this references, but it's really called supplemental forms. So you could have, we have many clients that do this. It might say transcript, and then you might have like a question like, are you going to upload it, or is it going to come directly from the transcript office? If they choose transcript office, you could then say, great, who's the point of contact? And they could put in like the first name, last name, and email. And this is where it gets really exciting because then they get a different message, right? So the transcript office would then get a message saying, hey, Dwight's asked you submit his official or unofficial transcript. Click here to do so. When they click into this obviously would look very different. It would then say, how do you want to submit it to us? Do you want to mail it in? Do you want to fax it? How do you want to submit it? Or do you want to submit it online? If they choose, yeah, I want to fax it, now you know to be looking out for it. And if they say, I want to submit it online, they can just directly upload it directly into Reviewer. If I go back to this information, we actually had it as this example. So if I go back to mental forms, you'll see that I actually have Tom Jerry here who did do a transcript request. So if this was a transcript, I could press view and it would show me the transcript that was uploaded. So for me, it's like, how do we use a bunch of logic that helps people figure out how they want to submit it to you to lower the barrier? Because you're going to have some people that still want to go through the applicant. Some are going to want to send it to you via email. Some are going to send you snail mail. Some want to do it online. So let them choose how they want to submit it. It gives you visibility so you can kind of keep an eye out for it and track it and then flag it once you get it, because you can upload the transcript to their profile or completely automate it. Yeah, you also mentioned like the time sensitive link. So the beauty of having them fill it out this way is you could have them provide the URL to it. Once it gets submitted, if it is time sensitive, it can flag you guys so you know that it's waiting for you. You can go in there, click on the link, it'll then probably expire, but then you got the data, and then you can then kind of upload it back to their portal. Because Reviewer is a safe, secure portal, it allows you guys to store that confidentially. Really, really great questions. I think I got most of them. If there's questions that I missed, please do toss it into the chat. And again, while I'm waiting for questions to come in, this conversation is going to be, it's obviously recorded, so we're going to send it out. We're also going to kind of share out this, convert it to a blog post. We'll also offer kind of like some screenshots as well for each of these different sections. But again, I don't want to kind of downplay. There's some really good information here that I didn't go through because you guys don't want me just to read off of my computer. But it kind of talks about like what are these elements? Why are they important? How do you actually implement it? And then again, exercise to figure like where do you sit? Yeah, so talk a bit more about the impact follow-up form capabilities. I'm glad that you mentioned form capabilities because that's really what it is. Again, like the biggest roadblock and challenge people have is disconnected processes. So speaking at a very high level, like you have different ends of the spectrum. You've got scholarships who are collecting applications via email, fillable forms, PDFs, all these disconnected processes. So on that note, you're already kind of behind the eight ball because nothing has been systematized. Where I think most people live, though, is that they use, or some people live, is that be leveraging tools and technology to try to create efficiencies. They go through the entire process, but then when it comes to like your impact reports and ongoing deliverables, they are no longer using technology. So there's no set time frame for when they want to collect that. There is no templates, right? So every single person is submitting it to you guys in different formats. Some are going to be sent to you via email. Some are going to fill out like a Word doc or PDF and then attach it to you. Some may never do it. So the thought process behind this, again, we want to think through systematically, like what do we want scholars or the recipient to submit to you guys? Build those as templates in Reviewer, and then lower the barrier by leveraging automation and communication that notifies them when they're ready to submit it. Again, their profile is going to look different. So I go back to like looking at their application itself. Like somebody who doesn't get selected for a scholarship probably shouldn't be submitting a fund disbursement form or an impact report, right? So it's all about using progression where like once Michael has been selected, he or she then moves into that workflow, which unlocks that capability. But again, all they're doing is getting notified. They rejoin their profile, which is great because they're already familiar with it. They used it already to submit their applications, and then there's adding to it. But again, the idea is that once they submit those ongoing forms, you have to be able to go back and find them. So that's where this supplemental form comes into play, because over time it's going to look very different. It's going to have transcripts, it's going to have references, it's going to have fund disbursement forms, it's going to have impact reports. And because all of that information lives on Michael's profile, it then unlocks all the reporting capabilities that you guys then need to do something with that. I don't remember the quote, but basically it's like data is pretty much irrelevant unless you can actually use the data to make actionable next steps, right? So by systematizing it, not only do we lower the barrier and collect things, but also allows you guys then to report back on it and do whatever you want with it. So a question came in that's actually a really good follow-up to this. So basically, like you offer grant programs, and if the recipient does not submit their final report, they're not eligible for any other grants. So that goes back to your admin dashboards. Again, this is not really where you execute this. Talked about how it provides visibility, right? So it shows you all of your dates and your deadlines. It shows you progresses. It shows you where people are at every step of the cycle. I mentioned before that this is also where you can measure references, right? So are references done or not done? The same thing holds true for those steps to do their what do you call it, their final report. You'd be able to visually see everybody who needs to submit a final report. Are they done or not done? If they're not done, let's help them, right? So let's leverage email reminders, either manually or via automation, to send them reminders. And then that way you can ensure that they come in. But if they never do come in, now that we know it, right? Because the system says it's either done or not done, and then you can flag it. So that when you go to do another cycle, you can say, hey, Kyle applied last year, but he never did a final report. So that makes him automatically ineligible. Yeah, so question on like EU rights, so like GDPR compliance and things like that. Yes, we are compliant. A lot of that is more process oriented. So like we at Reviewer, so you own all of your data. So that means you have all the different kind of controls around it. So like the right to be forgotten and similar restrictions from a technological perspective, yes, we are. But a lot of that's going to be more like your own internal process. Like from year over year, like what do you do with it? Do you remove their information? Do you scrub it? Like what do you do? So yeah, that's all process oriented. Really great questions. I know we're approaching an hour. I've blocked off lots of time, so I'll hang out for as long as you guys want. But yeah, other questions you guys might have, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be about Reviewer or today's topics. If there's other barriers, challenges, bottlenecks that you guys are running into, I hope that I can provide some insights just from our experience. If not, I certainly hopefully have the resources to find them for you. So any other questions you have, please do fill it up in chat. And I know it takes some time to type in messages, so I'll give it some more time unless questions come in. So a question came in, is the program matching feature optional, or do they have to fill that? No, everything is optional. That's the beauty of Reviewers. This entire system is built like for the people, by the people type of platform, where everything that you see here has been direct feedback by people like yourselves who have been doing scholarships for many, many years. And so when we kind of go through the implementation of Reviewer, we're as hands as you want us to be. We love to be involved in making recommendations on how to maximize the most that we have to offer, plus any other kind of consulting or best practices that we can offer. But yes, like if that does not align with your process, by no means doesn't have to be enabled at all. Great questions. We have another couple more minutes for questions to come in. Again, if they keep coming in, we'll stay on for as long as you guys want, but a couple more minutes for anything else. So question came in about like best practices when looking at GPAs. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely chat more if you're interested in that. It's a bit of a polarizing topic. So at a very high level, when I'm designing a scholarship, I wanna help build personas around applicants that help me compare them to other candidates and build the best case for who I want to select. And so for me, we live in a time now where like grades don't tell the whole story. Neither does financial needs or anything like that, nor does essays. And so for me, it's like a whole, like, comprehensive picture of applicants. So this is a real client of ours. I think it's a really well structured scholarship application. So they're getting more information around, like, where do you currently go to school? They are doing transcripts. They're collecting things like GPA, test score. They leverage GPA as part of their selection criteria. Um, you can start to, at that point, leverage weighting. So, like, for me, just very personally, I don't put a huge emphasis on grades. There's many factors that might influence somebody's academic achievements. So I might actually weight that lower than, say, for example, like their essay prompts or their financial need. I also don't want my review team subjectively ranking people on GPA. So I would bracket this. I would create like 4 or 5 different brackets of like GPA. So like 3.75 to 4.0, 3.25 to 3.5, just as an example. And for each one of them, allocate points. So if you have like a 4.0, you might get 3 points. If you got a 3.0, you might get 2 points. High level example, right? And then again, I would then weight that. So like, I might say, like, I want my essays to have a 50% weight. I want my financial needs to have a 30% weight, and then I might want this to have like a 10 or 20% weight in comparison to everything else. So automatically accounts for scores, it takes the subjectivity out of the review team, and it weights it separately. Now for you, you may weight that higher, that's totally fine. That then kind of bleeds into like building the comprehensive persona on the applicant. So from here, I then transition to financial needs. I really love this example because it's not just asking like how much financial need do you have. They're getting deep into like, what's your family income? Tell us more about your expenses. If you didn't get a scholarship, how do you intend to pay for this? So, for example, like, are you going to take out a 9% student loan, or are you the grandchild of like the Buffett family, right? Making up examples, but you might have who has, low income, but they're the grandchild of Warren Buffett, versus somebody else who has really high income, but they have to go take out a student loan. So all of these play hand in hand, using the FAFSA SAI calculations, doing text and 40 uploads, and then from here transitioning into your personal storytelling. So both text-based essays, video essays, letters of recommendation, and then every one of these connects together to help build a bigger picture of your candidates. So right now it's very challenging. It's very, well, I take that back, it's not. So what ends up happening is you might have somebody input a different GPA than they have within their transcript. And that's a really good use of AI. Specifically, I think I noted here, I put it under accessibility enhancement. But there's tools out there, OCRs, it's basically optical recognition. And what can happen is it can read file uploads and then translate it. So for example, if in the file upload you've got a transcript, you've got like their first name, last name, GPA, test scores, it can pull it out of the file upload. Once it's pulled out of the file upload, it gives us flexibility to do something with it. So in theory, you could then compare it in real time to their form to say, hey, did this match or not, right? To give you those insights versus you manually comparing every single transcript to their GPA.